Well, welcome to HR Doctors. I am super excited today to have my guest Sean on with me. Sean and I have been buddies for a number of years, and a few years ago, Sean founded a employee well-being and mental health app called CheckingIn. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brent. I'm excited to get the conversation started.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about CheckingIn.
Yeah, so CheckingIn is a complete mental health and well-being platform for employers. And what we do is we support employers to be able to provide a tool that can help their employees, first of all, build emotional intelligence and self-awareness, but also to be able to help process and work through different feelings and emotions. We also have integrated ongoing campaigns where we run on a monthly basis with different experts come in and do different training, as well as ways for companies to measure how are they doing from a mental health perspective overall. So it is a full and complete well-being platform, and really focusing on supporting the employee's mental health.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I've obviously seen the journey from when you started it just under 4 years ago and seen the progression through. And again, the whole purpose behind HR Doctors here is to help, whether it's employees, job seekers, businesses, bridge that gap between the disconnect. As I've shared on our webcast in the past, I feel that there's like 3 pillars that are critical for not only successful hire, but for retention as well. And pillar 1, whether you use an external agency partner like us or whether you do it on your own, is your recruitment strategy. Really like knowing what you're looking for from a company perspective, having a vision, a mission, like being able to properly engage your external audience and hire great people. Pillar 2 is more so on the business of how you train, onboard, coach, performance manage, and really set that employee up for success. Whether you're bringing in, a high level CFO or even a CEO or whoever it may be, where you expect someone to be able to come in and just hit the ground running, you still need to set that person up for success. And pillar 3 is the intangible of like the employee. And I really feel this is where CheckingIn like hits a home run, where we've seen situations where external factors that are out of the business's control and even often out of the employee's control affect their performance, their ability to do their job, which is why I was super excited to have you on, because I really feel that this is a tool that can help employers better understand the factors or things that are affecting an employee and maybe be able to be there as a resource. Some things just may be things that are things completely out of everybody's control, but I think the investment that businesses and people put into their careers is one where a tool like this can really help everybody better understand and to make sure that businesses are doing everything they need to do and people are doing everything they need to do to make sure that those external factors don't have a negative impact, because those negative impacts affect everybody. So Sean, with that in mind, like, tell us a bit more about CheckingIn and like where you even came up with the concept and how you got to the point where you founded the platform.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of add on to what you're saying before jumping into the origin story, when you think about any business, what makes a business special is its people, and we all know that, in particular in the field of HR. And when you look at mental health, how does it impact your business? It impacts every aspect of your business. So people touch every part of your business. Mental health is involved in everybody's. Everybody has mental health. So from that perspective, it's like, when we look at it, it's not just a tool, but it's a way of being. It's a way to shape, the foundation of your culture. It's a way to empower people to optimize performance. It's a way to, like you said, help them build those intangibles. So it really does impact every part of your business. And for me, the idea of where CheckingIn started was, it was built off of my last startup, where my co-founder and I started to see a different vision for our business. And we started working with a coach. And through that experience, I really just saw the power of emotional intelligence and how understanding how I was feeling and how my energy levels were throughout the day, how I could optimize my own performance. And so from that perspective, I just thought, oh, maybe there's something here. Like maybe there's a way that we can take this idea of a daily check-in and help other people. And so that's ultimately how the business got started. And then we slowly built it. So it took a little bit of time, but it was really, done as a side hustle to start. My past developer who we tried to hire at Front Funder, who declined, unfortunately, I reached out back to him about 5 years later. And through that journey, he, had built a lot of skills. And I reached out to him and just said, "Hey, I have this idea. Are you interested in helping us, helping to create this?" So Emerson, great developer. We connected with him, and through that experience, we started building CheckingIn, slowly with one feature at a time, and now have built it out from, what it was, a B2C app, into now more of a B2B app.
Interesting. I had a conversation with a previous guest on the show, Lori, who talked about like vulnerability. And one of the things we discussed that I struggle with as an owner is I almost feel like the stress, the trauma we go through as business owners in a startup phase is just what we sign up for. And often we like close ourselves off and don't share those challenges with our employees. And one of the things that she helped me see was that by not being vulnerable with my employees, I almost give them the perception that it's not okay to be vulnerable at all. But whereas me, I almost want to like, that's what I signed up for, but it's maybe not what they've signed up for. And I wanted to be able to be a resource to them. But by not being vulnerable with them, they're not being vulnerable with me. And it was really interesting to hear that something along those lines is kind of a trigger point for you. And I wonder if you're, maybe willing to dig in a bit further on like what was, maybe not what was going on, but where you were seeing that disconnect for you in your previous company that kind of led you down this path. Because I think it's like a critical part of that origin story. It sounds like a really like interesting piece that there was a disconnect for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fully agree. So Lori, she's amazing, and we're actually doing some work together. She's going to be on the CheckingIn platform shortly as well.
Nice.
But one of the things for us is you tone at the top. So you're exactly right. When it comes to leadership, if leaders aren't leading by example, when it comes to vulnerability, when it comes to emotional intelligence, then how can you ever expect any organization or anyone within that organization to have the courage to be able to speak up, to acknowledge how they're feeling, and to get the support that they need? And in particular, when you talk about mental health, there is a stigma within mental health, and whether or not people, choose to accept that, the reality is that it still exists.
Right.
And so, as leaders, we actually need to be more over the top to help promote things. When it comes to benefits, when it comes to different ways the organization can support their people from a mental health perspective, and it's just again good for business. There's tons of studies that show the more you invest in mental health for your people, the greater return you will have, and it amplifies and magnifies, year over year. So it compounds. So from that perspective, it's not only good for your people, but it's good for business. When it comes back to that origin story, I think for me personally, it wasn't so much a specific moment or an incident really that triggered kind of this awakening when it came to my own self-awareness journey. But it was just the act of doing a daily check-in. So my homework from my coach, Judy Brooks, she's amazing. What my homework was to do one number, one word. So the idea of saying the number between 1 to 10, how much energy do I have right now? And then the word, what's one feeling word? So how do I feel right now in this moment? So right now I would say, I'm a 9 and I'm optimistic. And it was just that quick, it takes less than 15 seconds to do it.
Sure.
But really just a way for me to sort of like reframe and understand how I was feeling. So what started to happen is, I'm pretty analytical. And so over time I started, documenting this. I built an Excel spreadsheet, started tracking it, built some like formulas, and was looking at my patterns and my trends. And I started noticing different things. So over time, I was able to sort of course correct or learn from different patterns that were showing up. And that was really something that started changing the way that I started showing up for myself and for my colleagues. So that was kind of like, the aha moment where it was like, I think that there's something powerful here. Why don't I share this with others and see if they can have a similar experience? And, I did, and they started giving me that sort of unbiased opinion and feedback of, wow, this is actually really cool. I've never done something like this. And so this is another question, for you, Brent. Do you brush your teeth every day?
Yes.
Good answer. I've yet to find someone who would be honest enough to say no. And let me follow up with that question. Why do you brush your teeth every day?
That is a good question. Why do I brush my teeth every day? Well, I mean, I feel it's important to like keep my teeth clean. I mean, I'm actually a flosser as well.
Well, there you go. Your dentist loves you. But
Yeah,
and most people say that they want good oral hygiene, so they want good clean breath. They don't want to have cavities, so it's preventative maintenance. They, have done it since a very young, early age. So when you were first born, you probably started brushing your teeth or someone was doing
right.
it for you. And so it's a habit that's been ingrained that takes less than 2 minutes every day to do. And so when we started building Checking In, we started thinking, what is that equivalent of brushing your teeth every day for your mental health?
Mm,
And that is what a check-in is, right? It's that takes less than 30 seconds. It's super quick and easy to do, one word, one number. But if we do that every day, we can build a mental health practice that can allow us to understand where are we starting from. And then once we have that self-awareness, we can take that and start making changes if we want to make changes, right?
right.
So now it comes into self-actualization and starting to doing things.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a perfect segue because yeah, I hope you can let's dig in. Tell me how like the actual platform works and why as like an employer it's something I'd want to, to bring into my business and what the employee engagement piece looks like and how that then, converts to me as an employer and how I use that information to better support my teams.
Totally. And I think, you and your business here, when it comes to recruiting and retention, we've never really been in a position like we are today where, that recruiting side is very difficult and trying to differentiate yourself is a challenge. And so I think a lot of companies that we're working with, one of the significant value adds that we're able to help is that we're showing that the next generation in particular, Gen Z, they really care about mental health, and they're choosing either one to stay with an employer or two to leave an employer or three to join an employer based on how that organization is supporting their health and well-being. And so from that perspective, building a mental health strategy and being able to articulate that, to have case studies and examples of how you're supporting your people beyond just your employee assistance plan, I think that's a really key component here is, that used to be the gold standard, but that's no longer the case. And there needs to be more. There needs to be more preventative and proactive measures to support your people. But that's a really important, part of our business is we're helping to build that foundation and that fabric as a starting point so that you can recruit the best people, you can retain the best people. But most importantly, you're providing a tool that's going to be supportive of people's mental health.
Well, even just a tie into that, because you touched on a really great point, and part of my like goal through this is obviously we connect with some really phenomenal, like talented HR people that are, in these massive like national and international companies with HR teams of hundreds of people. And yet in Vancouver, the market we serve, there's we're an entrepreneurial city. There's a lot of small businesses and a lot of businesses where they don't have the resources or the depth. And again, you talked about all these different pieces that businesses are doing. And, part of where even HR doctors came from was us starting to share our open book of just what we do as a recruiting firm, whether you can use us or not. Like, here's what we do. So as a business, you can recruit better because turnover costs so much, hiring the wrong person costs so much. And so really like there is this disconnect, also providing that information to the employers or to the employees or the job seekers, because there's this divide, and really it's so critical and important for both sides to really get it right on the front end. And I think this tool is a great tool, that is something that even a small business can add that, again, another guest we're going to have on the show, Karis, she joined her firm as a senior HR leader because they had, I think it was like social workers within the company at Ada to be able to be there as a resource to the employees in the company. Well, a small business with 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, even 100 employees, there's no way they'll ever be able to compete with that. And you don't necessarily have to, but I think, again, it just gives you like another opportunity where there's a great tool that you can add to help, I guess, address all those points, whether you can use an agency or not doesn't mean that you can't like invest in the process and be really great on the front end. Whether you've got an HR person on your team or a deep team of 100 HR people, doesn't mean that you can't as a business invest on how you train, onboard, develop, coach, performance manage. And then again, that intangible piece, like I mean, whether we all know or don't, turnover obviously is such a costly piece to business. And if there's a tool like this that can make you more aware and give you better visibility and help you with retention, then again, it's about like adding those tools and understanding the value. And I know we're going to talk later about like, you know, the budget and line items and the cost return piece, but I just still think it's such a valid point to tie in that it's just another great tool. And it doesn't matter. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think it doesn't matter whether you're a team of 10 or whether you've got 10,000 employees, that this tool is one that can be, you know, integrated into the business and give you some extra visibility that can really help with that third piece, which is to me, the most difficult one. Hiring somebody, you know, it's not that it's easy, but I mean, everybody can hire somebody. And again, everybody maybe has like a way to coach and train. And I think everybody could focus on getting strength there. But that last piece is one where it's really hard to get great resources. And again, I really feel that this is one that really like nails that piece, or at least gives a business an option that they may not have had.
Well, first of all, I think you're exactly right. And when it comes to, you know, hearing others that are going to be on your show in the future too, Karis at Ada, that's one of our clients.
I know.
So yeah. Karis and Ada, you know, they are definitely at the forefront when it comes to really providing great tools and supports and really caring about the employee experience. So not only from a mental health perspective, but I can speak volumes of that company, you know, and their practices when it comes to supporting their people. Outside of that, you know, I think one of the things that you're talking about, which really hits home for me, is when I hear, you know, and this is no fault of anyone because we need to do a better job of it, but when I hear CheckingIn being described as an app, it actually irritates and irks me a little bit.
Yeah, sorry.
Not from your perspective by any means, but the reason for it is because historically that's where we started. Right? We built an app to support individuals. But over the past 4 years, as we've worked with over 200 companies now, what we're starting to realize is by listening to what employers are struggling with, it's much more than a need for a tool and an app to support employer mental health. So you can give them any tool, whether it's Headspace, Calm, meditation app, Insight Timer, but that's not going to solve your mental health problems in the workplace.
Right.
It might be a tool and an aid to support, you know, some individuals, but it's not a mental health solution. Your single EAP plan that most companies have used as that gold standard, that is not a mental health strategy and total solution. It is part of the solution, absolutely, and it has been the gold standard in the past. But as we look to why, you know, there's low utilization rates, why experiences of people using that tool, you know, there's a need for more. And there's a need for a holistic strategy when it comes to training your employees to understand what mental health is, to providing the adequate benefits that are flexible enough to meet people where they're at and what they need. And then also too, to provide these other ancillary tools when it comes to cultural understanding. If you have a culture that says you support mental health, but then have expectations of working 60-hour work weeks, you are not a mental health, you know, champion.
Right.
Because that's not realistic. And so I think understanding and trying to step back and looking at your whole picture when it comes to mental health and how it impacts your overall culture, that's where we really need to get to. And that's what CheckingIn is becoming, right? It is that mental health management system to help people discover, you know, through different surveys, through different tools that can help managers and employees know where they're at and how to make use of those resources that are available to them.
Nice. Well, let's say I'm an employee at a company and I'm either new to the company and they have CheckingIn already, or I'm an existing employee and they decide to adopt CheckingIn. Like, what is that like user experience like for me as an employee, and why is it something that like I should embrace?
Yeah, well, we really do cater to both, you know, the HR leaders, but then also the employees. So the end user is always that employee. And so most of the tools are designed towards supporting the end employee, but empowering the HR leader to really build best practices, training tools, the right people to bring in as well. So from that perspective, I would say, you know, it's a pretty simple, customized platform. So we'll work with the HR leader at the forefront. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks of lead time just to kind of get the system up and running. And most of that time is just spent understanding the current situation and environment and how to optimize the tool and set up the tool so that it can best serve your employees. And once they have access to the tool, we typically kick off with a 30-day challenge. And that 30-day challenge, helps individuals, one, become aware and get access to the tool and understand the resources, but also, it provides that handheld approach for people to ask their questions, to understand how to maximize, the value of what we're providing. And then after the tool is, the 30-day challenge is completed, each individual is going to get a pretty comprehensive report, 16 pages. It's going to show the pre and post change to an individual's well-being by using the tool. And then over time, on a monthly basis, we have a different speaker come in, talk about a specific monthly well-being theme. And then there's going to be action items to take the learnings from those live sessions. And they're going to be sort of supported through the app to continue sort of that engagement throughout the months that follow that initial kickoff strategy.
Right. Is there, you talked about in that first 4-week startup that you, I guess, work with the HR team or whoever it may be to try to better understand the situation. Is there anything you can share in terms of like what you do or questions you ask to try to, get that snapshot so that you can set the platform up best for the business that you're looking to support?
Yeah, so I mean, each case depends on, the individual organization. But typically what we like to do is, ask and understand what does success look like from the organization's perspective. Do you want to have a more meaningful impact to a fewer number of your staff members, or do you want to be able to increase engagement across all of your staff members? And most companies are going to say, probably a little bit of both. But then we kind of drill into, okay, well, what does the current environment look like? What have some of your recent engagement surveys or feedback from existing employees said? Where are there gaps? How can we sort of, introduce so that we can have the biggest engagement? Well, that's going to be dependent on what the needs of the people are. So trying to drill into some of the, current challenges that those organizations are facing, and then roll out the tool so that, we can speak to that. So in the kickoff call, we address some of those issues. And then at the end of the 30-day challenge, we sort of take the learnings and the findings, and we can work with those HR leaders to say, hey, here's how your people were doing at the end of the 30 days. Completely anonymous and aggregated data, but a wealth of insight to understand the sentiment of your organization and where you can spend future time in terms of training, in terms of, L&D initiatives, or different needs of specific segments within your organization.
You mentioned you have upwards of 200 companies that you've worked with that have adopted the platform. Is there any kind of correlation between the businesses that have had high levels of engagement that the company was already doing, that you feel like if you're doing this as a company, like you're doing the right stuff? Like, obviously you're talking to all these different businesses. Part of me wants to ask the question, what the ones maybe that didn't get great adoption, aren't doing. But the optimist would say maybe, if you want to share both sides, but if one, what are the companies that really have it figured out? What are they doing outside of the platform that created that mindset where the employees were already like engaged and looking for stuff like this?
Yeah, and it sort of like depends,
Sure.
obviously, on the organization. But I think in general, companies that have, go back to leadership leading by example. So leaders who are, actively engaged and promoting and talking about their mental health journey are paving the way for others to be able to say, yeah, we want you to express all your true feelings. We want you to show up as your true self. And by doing that, that's really the diversity of bringing, you to work and not trying to pretend to be someone who you're not, or to suffer in silence, or, to struggle. Because oftentimes when you look at performance, and performance either being measured of, is this person technically competent or have the right skills to do what they're doing? or are they struggling in some sort of emotional capacity that they're not able to perform? And so like understanding like the distinction between the two, is really important. But I think coming back to then what makes those companies successful is when you have a leader who's talking and speaking to their people from a place of empathy, from a place of understanding, and people aren't scared to show up and speak. That is ultimately what it means to have a safe and inclusive environment.
Right.
So I think that's the most important. Secondly, there needs to be like ongoing communication. So if you expect that the tool is going to be, introduced and rolled out, and then all of a sudden you're going to have great adoption and engagement and you're going to get the maximum value, well, think again.
Right.
It's not the case. So continuously, working with your dedicated campaign success manager is going to help to bring different new initiatives, different communication campaigns and channels. And then again, coming back to understanding what your people need. So getting that information in an aggregated and anonymous manner is the starting point. Then what you choose to do with that is sort of that next layer. And that's where working with our team can really help to inform, here are some strategies around how we can continue to increase engagement, promote other areas of well-being, or get different, experts to come in and do the different training for those areas as well.
Awesome. From an employer perspective, how, I guess, not what the ROI, but from a utilization perspective, like if someone checks in and they rate themselves a 2 on energy and that they're, feeling down or whatever it may be, does that kind of on an individual basis get notified to somebody so they can go and provide support to that individual? Or is it more of like a holistic view? Is there kind of that, like, I guess, discretion or privacy piece? Like how does that like interface work from the information going to the, the HR team or the business leaders, and then how they use it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so all of the check-in information is aggregated and anonymous. So from an individual perspective, nobody will ever know who is checking in. Nobody will know, what you're checking in as or why you're checking in that way.
Right.
So at the HR kind of level, first of all, there's, the dashboard itself is not solely for HR leaders. The way that we've designed it is to increase psychological safety, you increase transparency. And so what we do is the dashboard's available to everyone. So individual companies can choose to make that dashboard where everyone can have access to see how the overall sentiment of the organization is, or they can restrict it so that certain individuals can only have access to it. But we really encourage companies to say, open it up, right? If everybody knows how everybody is feeling, but not how each individual is feeling, that's the true environment in which people are showing up to your organization.
Right.
And you know what? If there is a problem, being that there's consistently lower energy or specific sort of feeling words, wouldn't you like to know that information and do something about it?
Right.
Right? Rather than pretending it doesn't exist, having it manifest into something bigger, and then all of a sudden see a mass exodus of workers or having people go on disability. I mean, what's the number one leading cause right now of short-term disability? Right? It's mental health related claims. And it's more than double the number 2 and 3. So when you start looking and thinking about, bottom line costs and, the impact on productivity, which again, too, isn't really calculated, all of those things manifest into, smart business reasons why you should address your mental health issues as they come up, rather than suppress them and pretend like they're not there.
It's such an interesting piece that, just as you were saying it, like, had wheels spinning where, there's so many businesses, not so many, I mean, I can't quantify, but businesses that have got the, the foosball table and the ping pong and, beer taps and all this stuff. And yet they think that they're doing all this stuff and yet could have like terrible energy in the office. And it's a result of that environment that they've created. And they've got these things to say, we're a cool place to work, but maybe no one ever uses them, or they're not even important. And yeah, I mean, it's not, I guess, maybe so much about having those things. Great if your team's all got 10 out of 10 energy and they're loving it and they're using those things, but that's not going to be the reason that they've got that. It's going to be because you've got that culture and that mindset that this is an important thing. You address it, you're aware of it, you understand it, and then you've got these other fun things on the side. It's like a release to go, we know we're doing a good thing on this side, and as such, like, we want to have these other pieces just so when you need to take a brain break or you want to wind down on a Friday or whatever it may be, we've got some fun stuff for you. But that's like less than 1% of what your work week's going to look like, and really, how are you showing up on a daily basis, and how are we showing up for you? Yeah, very interesting.
Well, and I'm curious from your perspective, when employees are looking to join, different firms or companies, when it comes to kind of that holistic well-being angle, what are you hearing is really important from them during these times?
It's a really interesting question. I think it really depends on the situation that the person's in. And one of the things that I really try and coach, especially people when I hire them, but more so try to coach also our clients and the job seekers we work with, that everything's a partnership. When I interview like an internal employee, I really try to help them understand that they need to take an opportunity to interview me, and really that they need to understand what their primary goals, their objective. I feel, one of the things that continues to come up in our chats is about businesses that have like really refined and defined missions and visions. And, I follow Cam Harold's vivid vision and have a really well-defined vision of where our company's going, and our culture is real. I mean, HR Doctors is our core values: helpful, resourceful, driven, relentless, and sensible. And I think having those things helps us understand where we're going. And I think, again, this is something that that came up in one of our previous chats with Lori, about having your own personal like vision and mission and goals, and even your own like outside of work vision to know what you want to do. And I think a lot of job seekers don't do that because they're more focused on getting a job because they have to have the paycheck. And of course, like, if you're unemployed, it's a terrible situation to be in. And sometimes they'll forego some of those really critical and important things. I think where we see it more, and this is obviously something we do too, where we're headhunting, is the person who we've approached or the applicant who's currently employed and is in a position. When we talk to people often who are employed, we'll kind of go, you're either really happy in your job and you're not looking for a change, you're really happy in your job but you're open to it, or you're unhappy in your job and you really want to get out. And it's those people that are employed that are in the driver's seat and have more control over why they would or wouldn't change, is where this starts to become a really critical piece. The person who's unemployed, who just needs a job, this is like a really nice to have, but it tends not to be a driving factor of I'm only going to take a job, unless the person's in a great situation where they've maybe taken a leave. Getting paid today isn't a critical piece, but that disconnect in the workforce that we see is a lot of time those unemployed people, where we've got a ton of businesses trying to hire and a ton of people who don't have work, and yet we can't get them together. But I think really to answer the question, where we see a lot more desire and request and interest in truly uncovering what a company does, is from that individual who's in a situation where they're not stressed and pressured. And it's really about finding the ideal fit. And I think that first comes to, what's the position? What's the role? Who am I working with? What's the company like? What's the long-term future like? And how does the company show up for its employees? And I really think that's we've talked about a couple pieces where, especially through COVID, this pendulum swung, and it swung more in the employee's favor, and for good reason. They're able to ask for more, and businesses have really had to step up. And I think, with that pendulum swinging, employees want to know more on the front end, and also while they're there, if they're going to contribute and they're going to perform, how those companies are going to step up for them. But I think one thing we talked about, and this is a great segue, is, that ROI, that profitability piece, because I think businesses will continue to do whatever it takes to retain and engage their employees and invest in them, but it all has to tie to the bottom line. Like, businesses are here to make money unless they're a nonprofit. And so, as employees ask for more, it also can create this divide where, employers are willing to do more, but then employers also want to make sure they're getting that return. And that's obviously, to the bottom line. The company has to be profitable. The company can't do these things forever and not make money. Eventually, that's where, mass layoffs come from, right?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what you're saying here. First of all, from an employee perspective, clarity, right? If there's clarity in role, expectation, What are the benefits and how the organization's culture is shaped and formed. I think that's, a starting point for so much of the impact and the benefit that, any mental health management system or tool or training is going to bring to the organization. And so, from a purely, there's kind of like two ways of looking at this. One is more of the legal side, why you need to support your individuals from a mental health perspective. And there's actually an obligation, and I'm not going to get into like the details there, but there basically needs to be, and employers have a duty to ensure that their individuals are safe in the workplace.
Right.
But in addition to that, when you start looking at productivity, performance, short-term disability costs, long-term disability costs, absenteeism, right? These are all, as you kind of mentioned in your three pillars from the starting point, these are all intangibles that, if you have a great star performer, what their value is, regardless of how much you're paying them. And you generally are trying to keep that individual because the exponential value of what they produce on a daily basis and how they inspire others in your organization and how they influence the culture, right? That is worth, its weight in gold. And so I think like when it comes to, specific studies and cases, I mean, there's a great study that Deloitte, from a workplace ROI perspective, has shown that, for every dollar that you invest, I think it's after 3 years, it starts going up to, a 2.1 or something like that return. But it's significant. And so it's the idea of investing in your people is good for people, but good for business. And so, there's countless studies that have been done. And I think it's just like really reinforcing that and showing people the numbers, showing people the metrics, but trying not to, like, you're going to do a disservice if you try to just bring in, a calm and a headspace and just give it to your employees and say, yeah, we're taking care of their mental health, because you're not going to see the benefit.
Right.
You're not going to see the impact. And so you really, truly need that holistic approach. If it's not with checking in, if it's with somebody else, or you're doing it individually, these pieces, great. But tying that together, that's where you're going to start seeing the maximum return on that investment when it comes to supporting your people's mental health.
Yeah. Like one of the is that I talk about that pendulum swinging and how it used to, many years ago, be weighted really heavily towards the employer, where you showed up, you did your job, you followed the chain of command. And obviously now that swung, and there's a lot more kind of ability for the employees to say, this is the type of workplace that I want. This is the type of employer I want to work for. And again, the really great people, the ones who are highly desired and highly skilled, have a lot of ability to kind of control some of that narrative. How much, just in general, maybe not specifically to like your platform, but there's like a social responsibility, there's the employer's responsibility, there's the employee's responsibility. Like, is it everybody has to be responsible for this? Like, I talk about the, that old analogy of bringing the horse to water, right? Like, you can get this platform, but that doesn't necessarily mean your people are going to engage with it. Of course, like, hopefully if you've hired the right people and you've got that vision, mission, and all that stuff, that people will want to engage. But how much do you feel, the onus is on the employer, on the employee, or on like, a third kind of intangible factor?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of people, have this misunderstanding that employers are responsible for an individual's mental health. And that couldn't be further from the truth. You as the individual are responsible for your own mental health.
Right. As
an organization, we can do certain things that can support your mental health, right? And so part of that becomes giving you tools, giving you benefits to speak with counselors or therapists, creating a safe workplace where people can, show up as their true self, making sure that there's clear lines of communication if there are issues or challenges that can be addressed and mitigated. So I think there's, on the one hand, their accountability is shared, where for the employer, they need to provide those safe and inclusive workplaces that are going to help you to maximize your well-being. But on the flip side, as the individual, right? You can have all these great resources, you can work in a great culture, but if you don't manage and take care of yourself by utilizing some of those resources, or by activating some of the channels where these open lines of communication are, then that's the individual's problem that needs to be dealt with, and it's not an organizational problem at that point. And so I think that that's where it's really clear, where it's both the employer and the employee working together to create the best environment in place, so that people can thrive and excel.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point. I mean, I think I'm in full alignment of that. And I find this often, whether it's in employee like challenges we're faced with, whether it's helping find the right people for businesses, or dealing with performance management, or just general challenges on the back end, that again, I think it's like everybody has to have their responsibility in the process, whether it's mental health, whether it's your performance in the role. Like again, I think it's part of my job as an employer to make sure that I'm there for my team, and that I constantly provide them with resources and tools and information, and constantly
Totally.
be innovating. But I think it was great to hear that at the end of the day, the responsibility is also on the individual. And if it's from a mental health standpoint, that it's your mental health, and that it's on you to be aware of how you're doing, how you're feeling. I guess another piece that's interesting that I maybe want a little more insight from you is, so you've got this tool, you're creating this awareness for the employees. Is, I guess, is part of that then to create an environment where if somebody is struggling, that that they identify that, and then hopefully the organization has provided resources where they can put their hand up and go to the leader or go to HR or whatever and say, hey, like, I need help, like, I'm dealing with stuff, I'm not capable of like resolving it on my own, whatever it may be. Like, is that part of kind of the end game of this, is either helping people see that they're doing great, and when they're not, that either they know they're not doing well and they need to try to either help solve it themselves, or go, what, like, I'm struggling and I need help, and who's going to provide it? Because I know, especially for guys, like, that's not something we do. It's not something
Yeah,
that we
exactly.
do often, right?
Well, I think there's two things to that. So just first of all, jumping back to the last question, just to clarify something. So a manager's responsibility, yes, is to manage performance. How is performance impacted? Well, if somebody's struggling and dealing with, issues of managing their mental health, their performance will be impacted.
100%.
So yes, that manager then has a responsibility to support the individual so that they can optimize their performance and succeed in their role. And if that means that that individual is struggling with a mental illness or has a mental health issue, getting them to resources and supports is ultimately going to help that individual, but it'll also impact their performance. So I think, again, coming back to the consistent saying, good for people is good for business, couldn't be further from the truth when it comes to an employee and a manager relationship.
Well, and nothing worse than to like lose that individual because you're totally blind to it, and you just see a top performer that starts struggling, and you try giving coaching and guidance that ends up going nowhere, and then either the person exits or you exit them, when in reality
Exactly.
it was an external factor altogether, like just like the worst case scenario.
Exactly. And so I think, like, from that perspective, it's really important to understand that there are, again, both responsibilities from an employer, an organization, and a manager to support the individual employee who may be struggling, and getting them back to work and getting them reintegrated with the supports that they needed, with the changes in the environment that they need to excel and thrive. That's ultimately good management. So being able to really understand that, I think when you look at historically where businesses' priorities and focus would go to from an annual planning perspective, it's, okay, how are we going to increase sales? How are we going to mitigate costs? And I think what this shift and reframe has started to get people to think about is mental health is not a single line item in your budget. It shouldn't be.
Right.
Because the reality is if you want to hit those top sales metrics, if you want to retain the best people, right, there's mental health embedded in all of those line items. And mental health can be the driver to help people succeed, to optimize your sales, to reduce in cost savings through whatever process efficiencies that you're able to recover through employers being able to show up and being productive in their work. So I think like that's just a really important thing to kind of keep in mind as employers are thinking about, budgets for next year and how does mental health fit in.
Right.
Well, trying to carve out one line item and say this is our mental health budget, I think you're doing yourself a disservice as opposed to seeing, okay, how can we actually mental health be a driver to accomplish our ultimate, top line objectives from a revenue standpoint or cost mitigation standpoint.
Totally. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you guys started it as a B2C platform. Is CheckingIn something that still exists if whether I'm working somewhere that doesn't have it, I'm an individual, am I able to is there like a platform that just anybody's able to use, or is it now solely a B2B and I've got to be an employee to company? Like how does it work right now?
Yeah, so we do have a enterprise, which is B2B, and then we do have a B2C version, which is available online. Anyone can download the tool right now. There is quite a considerable difference. You're going to get the basic check-in version with limited history for that free version on the B2C side, and you're going to have a limited library. You're not going to have your ongoing campaigns. There isn't the full mental health management system. So it's an introduction to emotional intelligence, and we will always have that free version because that is an important way that we believe society generally just needs to build emotional intelligence.
Well, I was even just to interrupt quick. I was going to say, like, I think, it's something I'd want to share, and obviously we'll link a link to it in our post when we put it out, because again, if you're not able to get the resources, even go back to your, your founding story of the origin story of, you kind of tracking your data and just having that ability to kind of have that tool. If that's something that you feel would really resonate with you or something that you think would help you in better understanding who you are, if that exists and it's something that you guys have, I think it's great. Something that will make sure people are aware of, that they can utilize that tool to just make sure every day they're kind of seeing where they stand.
Totally. It's something that I think that we're really proud of at CheckingIn right now is we partnered with the Squamish Nation, and we're working on a fully customized environment that brings in more of the traditional teachings, the culture, the language. And it's a tool that's meant to be customized for the people that are ultimately using the tool. And so from that perspective, I think that's something like that we're really proud of, working with the Canadian Mental Health Association to develop, a different program that can again support some of their existing offerings is something that we're really proud of. And then, again, to be working at the organizational level, whether it's companies, sizes of 5 people, that's probably the smallest client we have, and then, upwards of tens of thousands. So from that perspective, it's fully scalable. And we're just really grateful to be able to be a part of the solution when it comes to supporting employer and employee mental health.
Nice. You answered my next question. I was going to say, in terms of client size or business size that would work with you guys. So, again, if you're, a small business, less than 5 employees, less than 10 or whatever, I still think it's great to know that a resource like this exists where you can use that kind of entry version and maybe not get all the resources, but still even let your people know that there's a platform out there that they can be more aware of their mental health and even start that conversation. Then again, if you're 5, 10 employees or, sky's the limit, obviously this resource and platform exists for businesses of all sizes. Awesome.
Totally. We, one thing is that we actually worked with BDC and Startup Canada to deliver basically a startup mental health challenge for, solopreneurs and companies of really small sizes. And what we found is that, coming back to what you said earlier, there's this hustle mentality. There's this, I need to work 60 hours, 80 hours a work week to get my business going. And you know what the reality is as an entrepreneur, sometimes, yes, that is in fact the case.
Yeah.
But it's understanding where you're currently at. So, if you need to take that time away and step back and allow yourself that space to rest, well, there's going to be a need and a time for that. And just because maybe you as the entrepreneur might be working that hard doesn't mean there should be an expectation for other employees in your organizations to be working at that same level. And so I think that's where it's, we really started working with organizations at that size to kind of help them to discover that and figure out how they could lead by still, choosing to work in the way that works for them, but also making sure that they're creating environments for others to be able to, show up from a mentally health healthy and safe perspective.
Nice. Well, we'll link any links and resources as we start to post these. But is there a best place to go, or a best way people can connect with you or connect with the Checking In platform?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking to have a conversation, LinkedIn is a great place to start. Send a friend request and reach out to me and just let me know you want to have a chat. Alternatively, checkingin.co. If you go there and you want to have a conversation, just click the book now function and schedule a meeting, and we'll be in touch with a member of our team to support and answer any questions.
Love it. Awesome. Sean, thanks so much for joining us. It was awesome connecting with you. I can't wait to share some of this content with our networks and hopefully, let people know that these resources are available and that there's lots that they can do to try to take control of this piece and make sure they're doing everything they can to either support themselves or support their team, support their businesses. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Brent. I appreciate the conversation, and we just look forward to continuing to build some momentum, awareness, and help to reduce that stigma and get people the supports they need when it comes to mental health. So thanks for having me.
Awesome.